What would you do if the last thing the world ever saw of you was a shaky, grainy clip, and that clip became the only key to a chilling, unanswered question? If that question sends a prickle down your spine, slow your breathing and listen closely. This is not a horror story invented to frighten you. It is a chain of recorded moments, official reports, and stubborn gaps, and the name that stitches them together is Elisa Lam. On January 31st, 2013, a 21-year-old Canadian student, last seen wandering the hallways of the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, became the subject of one of the internet's most relentless mysteries. Days later, the hotel's rooftop water tanks would reveal something the cameras did not show. The elevator footage is how the world found the story. Police released a 2.5-minute clip, a looping, warped little theater of gestures, and overnight, millions of strangers watched, replayed, debated. In the grainy light, Elisa steps into the elevator, then steps out as if checking the hallway. She presses buttons repeatedly, peers around the door frames, leans as if listening to a voice none of us can hear. At one point, she disappears from frame for a second or two, only to reappear, hands in her hair, conducting some private argument with some private logic. The footage spread like wildfire, and with it came the many explanations and the inevitable myths. When I say the cameras did not show, I mean several things. They did not show the roof hatch being opened. They did not show how anyone climbed the ladder to the tanks. They did not capture the crucial last minutes before Elisa streamed from sight into the unknown. What the recorded image did do, however, was create the perfect stage for 1,000 speculative narratives, ghost stories, conspiracy theories, clever sleuthing, and cruel trolling. We will walk through the footage carefully. We will read the coroner's report. We will visit the patches of fact where interpretation is allowed, and the open spaces where we must hold our uncertainty, because solving this case is less about picking the most theatrical theory and more about respecting the uncomfortable evidence. A missing woman, a hotel with a bloody biography, a rooftop cistern, and a coroner's conclusion that still leaves questions. Look at the elevator again and imagine you are a stranger watching in real time. Her hands fidget, she moves on and off camera, she presses many buttons. She appears to be talking to someone we cannot see. Some argued she was trying to get the elevator to move to escape an attacker. Others suggested party drugs or alcohol. The coroner's toxicology would later show no intoxicants at levels consistent with overdose. Instead, investigators learned she had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a detail that would be listed by coroners as a significant factor in her death. Those are forensic facts. The footage is unsettling. The toxicology showed no illicit substances, and the coroner listed bipolar disorder in the official finding. But the footage and the facts do not hand us the explanation of how a young woman entered a 1,000-gallon cistern and drowned there. If you think you know what happened from that elevator clip alone, you haven't yet read the coroner's own words. Wait for the detail that rewrites the scene. After Elisa was reported missing by her parents on February 1st, police and hotel staff searched rooms and stairwells, and for days the video clip became the only trace of her moving through the hotel's interior. On February 19th, a maintenance worker investigating guests' complaints about strange tasting, discolored water climbed to the rooftop to inspect 4 1,000-gallon cisterns. Through an open hatch, he looked down and, to his horror, saw a body floating in the water. The tank was drained and cut open. The body was recovered and later identified as Elisa Lam. The simplest, most brutal fact of the case: a young woman was found dead in a water cistern serving the hotel. Those cisterns were not small. Each was a cylindrical tank, roughly 4 feet across and 8 feet tall, sitting on concrete blocks. They were designed to be filled and closed, not to be climbed into. Access hatches were heavy and meant to be locked. Hotel staff claimed that the roof was alarmed and that only employees had the passcodes. Yet, amateur videos uploaded after her death showed the rooftop was relatively easy to reach via a fire escape, and that 2 of the tank lids could be opened. That apparent contradiction, restricted access on paper, discoverable vulnerability in practice, is the first real fault line in the official narrative. Did Elisa find her own way up a fire escape and into a tank? Did someone else carry or coerce her? Or did the security systems fail in a way we still don't fully understand? The roof was supposed to be locked, but the lids were open. Which is the more frightening truth? A security system that fails, or one that can be bypassed by a single desperate person? Now pause, breathe. The human story beneath these mechanical questions is not a puzzle to be solved in a single swoop. Elisa Lam, born Lam Ho Yi in Vancouver, was a student at the University of British Columbia, traveling alone through California the week she disappeared. She had posted photos of her trip. She liked to travel alone. The coroner's report later described her as a young woman with a history of bipolar disorder, a diagnosis, not an identity, and noted that her death was an accidental drowning, with bipolar disorder being a significant contributing factor. Those clinical words carry weight. They shape how investigators interpret the evidence, how the public comments, and how her story is folded into broader narratives about mental health and public safety. But the clinical verdict does not draw a clean path to the rooftop that night. There are several technical curiosities in the footage itself that invite scrutiny. Observers noticed timestamps were missing or obscured, and conspiracy forums swore the clip had been tampered with or edited before public release. Whether frames were slowed or missing has been argued by viewers who believe someone in the elevator is hidden. Whether the video's presentation removed context is a claim the LAPD never fully addressed in public. The truth is simpler and uglier. Grainy surveillance cameras and hastily released footage produce fertile ground for rumor. The elevator video tells us about movement and posture and time in the elevator. It cannot, by itself, tell us motive or what happened in those last hours on the roof. Some people who watched that clip swore someone else is there. The cops and the coroner saw something different. Which version will you choose to believe? The coroner's autopsy is essential reading if you want to move past speculation. It records facts that matter. Elisa's body was found naked in the tank. Clothing similar to the clothes seen in the elevator footage was floating in the water. Her watch and hotel room key were found with the body. The autopsy also states that the body was moderately decomposed and bloated by the time it was recovered. Importantly, toxicology tests did not show drugs at levels consistent with causing unconsciousness. That, coupled with the coroner's mention of bipolar disorder, led to an official ruling of accidental drowning with mental illness listed as a significant factor. Those are concrete medico-legal findings, and they constrain many of our theories, but they do not answer the how or the why. You may hear people insist that sexual assault must have occurred because of a particular finding in the autopsy, a reference in some reportage to subcutaneous pooling of blood, or to post-mortem changes that can be misread by laypeople and sensationalist headlines. A careful reading of the coroner's own words shows that some observations could be attributed to decomposition. Pathologists explicitly noted ambiguity about certain findings and would not assign sexual assault without clear supporting evidence. That equivocation is important. The public wants a dramatic explanation. Science often offers only probabilities and gaps. Elisa arrived at the Cecil late January and was last seen on January 31st. Her parents reported her missing on February 1st. The police released the elevator footage on February 13th to seek tips and help locating her. The maintenance worker found her body on February 19th after guests reported low water pressure and discolored water. The coroner issued a ruling of accidental drowning in June, citing bipolar disorder as a significant factor. Those are the spine of the case, and every reasonable theory must fit those dates and findings. Now, the theories. We will walk each one through the test of evidence and plausibility. Theory 1. Suicide or accident caused by a psychotic episode. Evidence for Elisa's known bipolar disorder, her reportedly odd behavior in the elevator, coroner's listing of bipolar disorder as a significant factor, lack of toxic levels of drugs. Evidence against the difficulty of entering the cistern without leaving evidence, the need to climb into or be placed inside an awkward tank, and the presence of her clothing outside the tank that seems inconsistent with a simple accidental fall. The coroner did not find clear evidence of a struggle on her body, but the mechanical logistics, how someone climbed in, leave room for doubt. Theory 2. Foul play, homicide and concealment. Evidence for the awkwardness of tank access, the hotel's chaotic security environment, a missing phone, and the fact that her body was in a place guests accessed for water. Evidence against absence of defensive wounds, lack of evidence of trauma consistent with homicide in the autopsy, and no witnesses or physical trace that conclusively points to another party. The coroner's findings do not rule out homicide categorically, but they do not supply evidence that would convert reasonable doubt into a prosecutable case. Theory 3. Gross negligence by the hotel, a non-criminal but morally culpable set of failures. Evidence for the hotel's long history as a place with suicides and deaths, the apparent ease of roof access shown in amateur videos, the fact that guests had been complaining of bad water for days, and reports that roof tank lids were not properly secured. Evidence against the hotel's claim that roof access and cisterns were supposed to be secured. Some staff reported that alarms and locks were in place. Proving negligence in a way that forces reform or compensation is a separate civil question from establishing a criminal act. Investigative journalists have pointed out the hotel's troubling record and inconsistent safety practices. Which story feels the most true? The psychotic breakdown, the murderous stranger, or a system that simply failed a traveler in need? Each one will pull a different chord inside you. A word about digital rumor and the modern sleuth. The internet did to this case what it often does. It amplified grief and fed it to curiosity. After Elisa's death, people dissected her social media. Strangers parsed her Tumblr posts and speculated about scheduled posts and whether her account had been updated after she died. People invented links between pop culture, the hotel's history, and wild biomedical misunderstandings. Netflix's documentary, Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, tried to corral those questions with investigative reporting, interviews, and context. Critics said the doc both helped fill gaps and trafficked in speculation. The lesson here is simple and important. Internet sleuthing can surface clues, but it also creates fictions dressed like evidence. Distinguish between corroborated facts and rumor, always. Even after the coroner's ruling, public interest never cooled. In 2020 and 2021, Elisa Lam's case resurfaced on TikTok and other platforms, bringing new waves of commentary and often cruelty. The footage is haunting and invites projection. Some treat it like a puzzle to be solved, others like a ghost story to be consumed. But underneath the viral clips are a grieving family and a young life that ended far too soon. When we make content about cases like this, the moral obligation is to be precise with facts, generous with empathy, and careful not to trade on horror that dehumanizes the person at the center. Don't let the internet's thirst for answers crowd out the simple human fact. A family lost their daughter. If you're still with me, make a note to treat speculation like a tool, not a trophy. If you want the most useful forensic information about this case, read the primary documents, the LAPD press releases, the coroner's autopsy, and reputable journalism from outlets that did actual reporting rather than repackaging social media theories. The coroner's file includes measurements, a list of personal effects found with the body, and the precise medical reasoning behind the conclusion. That evidence anchors our best interpretations and prevents us from floating off into romance novel explanations of what the clip means. Beyond the facts, we can cite lies the cultural imprint of the Cecil Hotel itself, a building that drew headlines long before Elisa arrived, notorious past guests, a concentration of deaths and suicides, and the bitter economy of a place located on the edge of Los Angeles' Skid Row. That context matters because it colors how staff and authorities responded. It colors how guests look at odd behavior. It colors public perception when the story goes viral. The hotel's biography is part of the story, but not the only part. The Cecil's history is a shadow, not proof, but shadows shape how we see everything that happens inside them. Let me show you something subtle that most viral retellings miss. The timeline of guest complaints about water. Guests reported low water pressure and strange tasting water. Some even described it as dark or black before the maintenance worker climbed to the roof. Those complaints were the reason the roof was inspected in the first place. That means, chillingly, that others had been bathing and drinking water that might have been affected by whatever was in that tank for days after Elisa disappeared. The idea that guests may have been exposed to contaminated water is a grim side note, but a true one, and it underscores a chain of institutional failure. Now consider the phone. Elisa's cell phone was never recovered. Phones can be lost, they can be robbed, they can be damaged. But the absence of the phone in this case fuels every theory that involves another person. If the phone had been found in the tank, it could have helped cement a timeline of events. Its absence means a physical piece of evidence is missing from our puzzle. And in criminal investigations, missing pieces are often the difference between certainty and persistent doubt. Missing phones are more than inconvenience online. In investigations, they are missing pages from a diary. What would a closed, meticulous reading of the evidence conclude? A responsible conclusion recognizes this. The coroner's office judged the death to be an accidental drowning and cited bipolar disorder as a significant factor. The autopsy found no drugs at incapacitating levels. The surveillance video is odd and incomplete. Tank access was possible despite security claims. Elisa's phone went missing. The hotel had a troubled history and possible security lapses. Those facts sit together without resolving into a single clean narrative. The most honest answer is we know more than rumors and less than a closed court case would require. Before I end, here are the details that real investigators would ask to verify and the corners where new reporting could still matter. Surveillance footage from stairwells and roof access points, maintenance logs showing who had rooftop keys or passcodes, a complete chain of custody for any physical items found near the tank, interviews with every person who had access to the roof in the days before the discovery, and credible forensic analysis of the tank's lids and ladder to see how feasible it would be for a single person to climb in and then close the lid. These are the kinds of concrete inquiries that turn mystery into either solved tragedy or provable crime. The best way to honor Elisa is not to spin the spookiest tale, but to demand careful questions and careful answers. If you've followed this with the patience it deserves, 2 requests before we go. First, if you value careful deep dives into cases like this, the kind that read the coroner's report, check primary sources, and honor the people at the center, subscribe. We post daily, and every day we unpack a different story with the respect and rigor it deserves. Second, leave one short comment below, accident, homicide, or unsolved mystery, and why. Your reasoning helps us see how these facts land on a wider public. Subscribing helps more viewers find responsible reporting and keeps the conversation honest. We upload daily. We finish where we began, with a question. The elevator clip remains an odd little theater of gestures. The cistern remains a sealed container that answered one terrible question but opened many more. What happened to Elisa Lam is both an individual tragedy and a mirror. It reflects our hunger for simple answers, our appetite for spectacle, and the thin line between curiosity and compassion. To solve a case like this with integrity, we must resist the easiest narrative and return to the stubborn work of evidence. If you want to keep doing that work with us, you know what to do. Subscribe, not because it makes you part of a fandom, but because it helps keep public attention on careful inquiry and human dignity. One last final thought for the edge of your attention. The most revealing document in this entire file is not the elevator clip or the hotel's reputation, it is the coroner's autopsy. Read it. Ask how each line of that file does or does not support the theories you prefer. The truth in this case, as in many others, is not an explosive revelation, but an accumulation of small, sober facts. It is in the way those facts sit together that meaning arises. When they do, tell us what you see. We will read with you. Thank you for staying with this story. If this felt different from the others you've watched about Elisa Lam, that was the point. We looked for the evidence first, the spectacle last, and the human being at the center before anything else. We return tomorrow with another true story.